I never thought much about phone booths. Honestly, who still uses them these days? They're relics from a different time, just as irrelevant as cassette tapes and floppy disks. But there's this one booth, one that I can't get out of my head. It's as if it's waiting for something, or someone. It started about 3 weeks ago. I moved to Carver, a small town in Pennsylvania, the kind of place where the local diner knows your order before you sit down, and the most exciting event of the week is a high school football game. I wasn't here by choice. After a breakup that turned my life upside down, I needed to escape from the noise of the city, from the memories. Carver was supposed to be that quiet escape, a fresh start. The place I rented is small but cozy, and I quickly fell into a routine. Morning coffee at Martha's Diner, walks through the park, and nights spent catching up on old books I hadn't touched in years. It was peaceful, until I noticed the booth. It sat at the corner of Harper Avenue and Willow Road, just outside the town's abandoned post office. You know, the kind of place that's been forgotten for so long that no one even remembers when it closed. The phone booth itself was weathered, its once bright red paint peeling, and the glass panels fogged with grime. At first glance, it seemed like any other relic from the past. But something about it caught my eye every time I passed. I told myself it was nothing, just my overactive imagination. Still, the booth seemed out of place. Maybe it was the way the air around it felt. Still, even when a breeze rustled the trees nearby. Or maybe it was how the light from the street lamp always flickered when I passed by at night. But the thing that really got me was the phone itself. Most phone booths like that don't work anymore, right? No one even bothers to maintain them. But this one rang. The first time it happened, I was walking home after grabbing takeout from the diner. It was around 10 p.m., and the streets were mostly empty. The wind was picking up, and I was eager to get home before the storm broke. I passed the post office as usual, keeping my head down, when I heard it. Ringing. I froze. My brain couldn't process it at first. Who would be calling a phone booth in the middle of the night? I glanced around, expecting to see someone. A prankster maybe, but the street was completely deserted. Rang. It was louder this time, insistent. Against my better judgment, I found myself walking towards the booth, each step slower than the last. My heart pounded in my chest, a cold sweat forming on my brow. As I reached the door, the ringing stopped. Dead silence. I stood there staring at the phone, my breath clouding up the glass in front of me. For a moment I felt relief. Maybe it was just a malfunction. But then, it started again. Ringing. This time, it was almost deafening. Without thinking, I yanked open the door and grabbed the receiver. Hello? My voice was shaky, even though I tried to sound calm. At first, there was nothing, just static. A faint crackling noise, like the phone lines were struggling to connect. Then a voice. Low, barely a whisper but clear enough to send a shiver down my spine. Don't turn around. My blood ran cold. I froze, my knuckles white as I gripped the phone. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. The voice continued, steady and emotionless. Whatever you do, don't turn around. I don't know how long I stood there, paralyzed by fear. It felt like hours, but it was probably only seconds. My breathing was shallow, my mind racing. I wanted to hang up, to run, but something kept me rooted to the spot. Then I heard it. A soft, barely audible shuffle behind me. Like someone, or something, was moving in the shadows. I could feel its presence looming just out of sight. My skin prickled, every hair on my body standing on end. Don't turn around, the voice repeated, a sinister edge creeping into its tone. I could hear something else now, beneath the voice. Breathing, slow and heavy, like it was right behind me, so close I could almost feel it on the back of my neck. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying that whatever it was would just go away. But the voice wouldn't let up. "They can't see you if you don't look at them," it hissed. "But if you turn, they'll take you." Suddenly the line went dead. The silence was suffocating, and all I could hear was the rapid thumping of my own heartbeat. I dropped the phone, stumbled out of the booth, and ran all the way home without looking back. I didn't stop until I was inside, with every light in my apartment turned on. I wish I could say that was the end of it. I wish I could tell you I never went near that booth again. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. The voice, the warning, and that feeling, like something was still out there, watching me. 2 nights later, it happened again. I was passing by on my way back from the store, deliberately crossing the street to avoid the booth. But just as I reached the corner, the phone rang. Ring. Ring. This time, I didn't go near it. I kept walking, trying to ignore it. But the sound was piercing. Every step I took, it seemed to grow louder, more desperate. I could feel my resolve crumbling. Before I knew it, I was standing in front of the booth again. Before I knew it, I was standing in front of the booth again, the phone ringing with that same relentless, insistent tone. My hands shook as I reached for the door. Part of me screamed to turn around, to leave, to forget this booth ever existed, but my body didn't listen. I lifted the receiver, my breath catching in my throat. "Hello?" I whispered, barely able to get the word out. For a moment, there was nothing, just that familiar crackling of static. But then, the voice returned. It was the same whisper as before, chilling and emotionless. "You're running out of time." My pulse quickened. I swallowed hard, trying to steady myself. "Who is this? What do you want?" My voice trembled, but I forced the words out. The static intensified, and for a second, I thought I heard something beneath it, something like a distorted laugh. The voice didn't answer my questions. Instead, it said something even worse. "He's behind you now." The air around me felt thick, pressing in on all sides. My legs were trembling. The instinct to turn around was overwhelming, but I remembered the voice's warning from the first night. "Don't turn around." I squeezed my eyes shut, clutching the phone to my ear. "Who's behind me?" I whispered. "What is this?" The voice, now lower, more malicious, responded. "It doesn't matter who. It matters when." "When?" I repeated, my voice barely a breath. "He's coming." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I slammed the receiver down and stumbled out of the booth, heart racing, my head spinning. I refused to turn around even though every fiber of my being screamed for me to look. I bolted down the street, running as fast as my legs would carry me. I didn't stop until I was home, behind locked doors, panting in the dark. That night I didn't sleep. Every creak of my old apartment felt like something shifting in the shadows, something waiting for me to let my guard down. And as much as I tried to convince myself that it was all in my head, the phone calls continued. They came at odd hours, never the same time, but always the same sound. Ring, ring, echoing in my mind. I began to avoid Harper Avenue entirely, walking blocks out of my way just to keep from passing the booth. But no matter how hard I tried, the phone kept ringing in my head. It followed me home in my dreams, in the silence of my apartment, in every darkened corner. 3 days later, I finally reached a breaking point. I couldn't take it anymore. The paranoia was eating me alive. I hadn't slept in days, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw the phone booth. I heard the voice. It haunted me, so I made a decision. I would go back. I would face whatever was waiting for me. It felt like madness, but I had to know the truth. I couldn't live with this, this thing hanging over me any longer. That night I grabbed my jacket, slipped out of my apartment, and made my way down to Harper Avenue. The streets were unusually quiet, even for Carver. Not a single car passed, and the air was cold and heavy, like the town itself was holding its breath. When I reached the corner, I stopped. There it was, the booth. The red paint looked black under the flickering street lamp, its glass walls smeared with something that looked almost like fingerprints. I swallowed hard, my breath coming in shallow gasps as I approached. Ring. Ring. The phone was ringing again. This time I wasn't surprised. I expected it. My hands were shaking as I reached for the door, pushing it open with a creak that seemed to echo down the empty street. I stepped inside, gripping the receiver with trembling fingers. Hello? My voice came out as a shaky whisper. The static was louder this time, almost deafening. For a moment I thought the line had gone dead. But then I heard it. A voice, but not the same whisper from before. This one was different, more guttural, raspier, like someone who hadn't spoken in a very long time. I'm coming for you. The line went silent, the receiver buzzing in my hand. My heart nearly stopped. I dropped the phone, stumbling backward, my back slamming against the glass wall of the booth. Suddenly, from the corner of my eye, I saw it. A shape, dark and indistinct, moving just beyond the edge of the street lamp's light. It was there, barely visible, but unmistakable. It was watching me. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. Every instinct told me to run, but my feet wouldn't move. The shadow grew closer, its outline becoming clearer with each step. I could feel it, cold, suffocating, creeping toward me, slow but deliberate. The voice from the phone echoed in my head. Don't turn around. But it was too late. I turned. Standing just a few feet away was a figure, tall, impossibly tall, its limbs too long, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. Its eyes, or what should have been eyes, were hollow, dark voids, staring straight at me. The air around it seemed to warp, bending in ways that made my stomach churn. It didn't move, but I could feel it pulling me closer, like gravity itself was bending toward it. My mind screamed, but my body wouldn't listen. I was trapped, paralyzed by fear. Then, it spoke. Not with words, but with a feeling, a pressure in my skull. It wasn't human. It couldn't be. You shouldn't have answered, it whispered, the voice wrapping around my mind like a cold hand. Now you belong to me. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The world around me dimmed, the light from the street lamp fading, until there was nothing but darkness. The last thing I saw was the figure, reaching out for me, its long fingers stretching toward my face. The next morning. They found me in the phone booth the next morning, slumped against the glass, my face pale and eyes wide open. But I wasn't there anymore. Not really. The doctors said it was shock, that something must have scared me so badly I'd fallen into a catatonic state. But I know the truth. I'm still in there, in that booth. Every night, in my dreams, I hear the phone ringing. Rying. It never stops. And each time, I can feel it getting closer. That phone booth is still out there, on the corner of Harper Avenue and Willow Road. And if you're ever passing through Carver and you hear a phone ringing, don't answer it. Because if you do, he'll be waiting for you too. I hope this story gives you the chills you were looking for. It's designed to leave the audience with a lingering sense of dread and keep them hooked until the very end. Let me know if you'd like any adjustments or additional elements to intensify the fear.